Welcome to the 1984 Yamaha Service Seminar. This RD500 service video has been designed especially for Yamaha mechanics. This video contains 4 sections. Everything in this video presentation is based on the latest information that was available at the time it was made. You are advised to refer to the workshop manual, assembly manual, and technical bulletins for further information. First of all, you must realize that you are a key person in Yamaha. Whether or not the customer is satisfied with his Yamaha RD500 depends on you. So you must know everything about the RD500, especially its new technical features. We will start with an outline of the model and its new technical features. The Yamaha RD line is directly based on Yamaha's Grand Prix proven two-stroke racing technology. In 1982, Yamaha began developing a 500cc two-stroke V4 racer for a world champion, Kenny Roberts. In 1983, the OW70 carried him to 6 Grand Prix victories. Now in 1984, we have the RD500, the ultimate two-stroke road machine, based on V4 factory racing technology. Let's look at the RD technical features one by one, beginning with the power unit. The Yamaha RD500 is powered by a compact, lightweight, water-cooled two-stroke V4 engine with a cylinder angle of 50 degrees, a single shaft balancer, and the famous YPVS, Yamaha Power Valve System, for each cylinder. The YPVS matches exhaust port timing to engine speed in order that torque can be maximized at all speed ranges, thus eliminating the traditional low to middle range torque losses associated with high-performance two-strokes. The machine is quiet thanks to the YPVS and the similarly unique single-shaft balancer. And the superb reliability of the Yamaha RD500 is further enhanced by the use of maintenance-free CDI, a 4-outlet economy-type auto-lube mechanism linked to the YPVS, and a trochoid oil pump for lubricating the transmission unit. What makes the Yamaha RD500 even more distinctive is a unique piston and crank reed valve induction system with 4 VM26 force-controlled carburetors, details of which you will see later on in this video. The incredible power output is stabilized by this highly efficient radiator and an electric-driven fan. Even the kick crank is different on the RD500. First you pull it towards you, turn the crank, and then kick it. The design of a lighter and stronger double cradle type frame is based on racing technology. The right-hand down tube can be removed for easy engine dismounting. The ventilated double discs with the opposed piston-type calipers produce incredible brake performance, and combined with the adjustable anti-dive systems. A unique horizontal decarbon shock absorber is located under the engine to give the lowest possible center of gravity. Its spring preload and damping can easily be adjusted. You can just lift the fuel tank to obtain easy access to the top of the engine. The headlight aiming can be adjusted by remote control knob. If the machine was not correctly assembled and properly inspected before delivery. It is extremely important that you carefully assemble and check the machine in accordance with the Yamaha assembly manual. You must remember that whether or not the customer will return to your shop for services depends solely on how you prepare the machine before it is delivered to the customer. At this point, we will review some of the key points of assembly and pre-delivery inspections. The first part to be installed is the handlebar. It is placed in position using a hexagon bolt, then secured with pinch bolts. After the handlebar is installed, check if the clutch cable, brake, and speedometer cables are routed properly. Then put the screen on the fairing. Tighten each screw a little, and then tighten each one completely. Finally, check if you have put the rubber cap on each nut and if the screen is clean. The battery needs to be filled with electrolyte up to the upper level for initial charging. Initial charging must continue for 10 hours at 0.55 ampere. The breather pipe must be correctly routed according to the illustration. After all parts have been installed, you must check if they are fastened safely and correctly. The next important process is delivery inspection. The engine needs to be adjusted properly, and each unit must be checked before the machine can be delivered to the customer. We will review the major points of pre-delivery inspection. The first inspection point is the transmission oil. The machine must be put on a flat floor, and soon after the engine is stopped, the oil level can be checked through the inspection window. Then check if there is a sufficient amount of coolant in the radiator and in the recovery tank. The pressure in each tire must be checked. The front tire on a single rider must be adjusted to 1.75 kilograms per square centimeter, and the rear wheel to 2.0 kilograms per square centimeter. This model is equipped with V-range tires, designed for greater stability and durability at high speeds. Whenever the tires need to be replaced, you must use the V-range tires. The next step is inspection and adjustment of the brake. Check the free play at the end of the front brake lever. The play must be about 5 to 8 millimeters, adjusted if necessary. Then check the brake fluid. It should be equal to or higher than the lower indicator level. To facilitate this check, the side stands should be down and the handlebars should be completely turned to the left. The free play for the rear brake is checked visually by the height of the brake pedal. The end of the push rod of the rear brake must be seen inside the linkage hole. Then check the level of the brake fluid. It must be up to or higher than the lower level. The free play for the clutch lever must be 5 to 8 millimeters at the end of the lever, adjusted if necessary. The next inspection item is the steering. Move the handlebar to the right and left. The machine is powered by a V-type 4-cylinder engine. Each cylinder is individually numbered. Viewed from the rear of the machine, the top left cylinder is number 1, and the bottom left is number 2. The top right is number 3, and the bottom right is number 4. You must remember this numbering by heart. The engine serial number is located below the exhaust port of cylinder number 3. Cylinders number 1 and number 4 are sparked simultaneously on the V-type engine at a crank angle of 180 degrees. When the crank turns another 180 degrees, cylinders number 2 and number 3 are sparked simultaneously. This illustrates the sequence of ignition timing. The timing is checked at the second cylinder. Before dismounting the engine, the machine should be washed and engine oil and coolant drained. The drain bolt for the engine oil is located at the left side of the engine facing the front. And the coolant drain bolts are located on the water pump cover and at the lower cylinder head. The drive sprocket nut must be loosened before dismounting the engine. We will now begin to remove the engine. First, the fuel tank and the seat are removed. The knob on the fuel cock must be set to on or reserve position. Remove the fuel cock from the stay. Then remove the fuel cock and the tank as a set. Then remove the muffler. When installing the muffler, the third muffler is mounted first. The air cleaner case is removed next. It is fastened with 6 bolts. Then remove the radiator and the hose. There are 4 bolts. Remove the hoses connected to the cylinder head and the water pump. Incidentally, some service jobs can be performed without removing the engine. For example, servicing of the top ends overhaul, the pistons and cylinders, and some clutch parts. Now back to engine removal. After the radiator and hoses have been removed, remove the throttle cables and the carburetors. First you must disconnect or remove all the fuel and oil pipes and connectors. The down tube at the right-hand side of the RD500 is removable. This helps to remove the engine more easily. This bolt must be fastened again temporarily during service. We recommend that you use a jack to make the job easier. Then remove the engine mounting bolts. After the engine mounting bolts have been removed, move the engine up and forward a little, then pull it out to the right. If it is difficult, you might want to first remove the magnet cover. Before we begin disassembling the engine, please remember one important thing. Each part must be removed or disconnected according to orders, and parts need to be grouped by sections, and each part must be marked so it is easily identified for reassembly. We will now begin disassembling the engine. We will also show you some important points for reassembly as we proceed. The cylinder head nuts are removed from number 10 to number 1 in 2 stages. Crown nuts number 1, 4, 9, and 10 have copper washers. The thermostat outlet is located on the upper cylinder head. This is for the lower cylinder head. It is removed in the same way as the upper cylinder head. When installing the cylinder heads, the hose outlets face both the upper and lower cylinder heads. The upper and lower head gaskets are different and are identified by white paint numbers. The number 1 gasket is for the upper cylinder head, and the number 2 is for the lower cylinder head. When installing, the gasket identification numbers should face up towards the cylinder heads. If gaskets are incorrectly installed, coolant will not flow properly, with possible engine trouble resulting. The YPVS link can be disconnected from the cylinders by removing the Allen bolt located at the holder. When installing rods, number 1 rod must be installed to the upper cylinders and the number 2 rod to the lower cylinders. Intake manifolds for the first and second cylinders are identical, and intake manifolds for the third and fourth are also identical. They are installed in such a way that all of the oil inlet ports face down towards the ground. All of the 4 reed valves are identical. They must be installed in a specific direction. The 2 lines on the body must face towards the cylinder. The pistons for the upper cylinders have air inlet ports, and the pistons for the lower cylinders do not have air inlet ports. The piston rings are the same for all cylinders. The top piston ring is a keystone type, and the second ring consists of a plain type and an expander. When the piston ring is installed, be sure the ring's ends and the knock pin match each other correctly. When you are removing a power valve, you must put a piece of wood in the exhaust port to hold the valve in position. Then loosen the bolt and remove the power valve. The power valves have identification numbers, 1 or 2 on them. Valves having an ID number 1 must be installed on the same side. When you install the valves, you must not forget to put in the knock pin also. We will now review the mechanism and operation of the auto lube pump. The RD500 oil pump output is controlled by 3 different means. Oil consumption is reduced in the low to middle speed ranges, and it is increased in the high speed range. As a result, the total oil consumption has been reduced. This shows the oil pump in an intake stroke. Oil flows from the oil tank to all areas around the plunger. The plunger rotates as it is driven by the drive gear. It is also pushed to the right by the return spring. When a vacuum is created within the oil chamber and the oil inlet of the plunger comes in front of the oil passage of the pump, oil flows into each oil chamber. As the plunger rotates farther, it is pushed to the left by the cam in such a way that it compresses oil. When the plunger and the outlet port of the pump meet, the oil pressure in the oil chamber surpasses the force of the check valve and the oil flows into the first and fourth cylinders. As illustrated here, the plunger is driven by the cam and the return spring and repeats intake and output strokes as it turns 90 degrees. Every time the plunger turns once, oil is supplied to the first and fourth cylinders, and after 180 degrees of a turn, oil is supplied to the second and third cylinders. We must talk about the throttle at this point. As the throttle opening increases, the control axle rotates. An eccentric cam is located at the lower end of the axle, and it increases the stroke of the plunger. Now we will look at the cooling system of the RD500. The coolant starts to flow through a different channel when the coolant temperature rises above 71 degrees centigrade. When the temperature reaches 71 degrees centigrade, the thermostat opens up a gate. The coolant starts to flow and it is cooled by the radiator. When the coolant temperature increases further and reaches 105 degrees centigrade, the electric-driven fan starts to run and the coolant is cooled more. The water pump is mounted with 2 bolts. When you are installing the pump, you must make sure the drive gear and the driven gear are engaged to each other correctly. There is another bolt, which cannot be seen normally, under the water pump. When you are removing the crankcase cover, you must remove the water pump first. We will disassemble the clutch next. Parts have aligning marks, and washers are positioned in particular directions. First, you must match the aligning marks on the pressure plate and the clutch boss. The projection of the cushion ring must be aligned between the punch marks on the clutch boss. When you remove the push rod, you must do it carefully because the O-ring is there too. The clutch lock nut must be removed using a clutch holder special tool. There are 4 rings that are assembled at the base of the boss. The projected part of this ring must face outside, and the outside mark of this ring must also face outside when you are installing it. Before removing the clutch housing, you must first loosen the drive gear nuts. We will now take some time to explain the friction gear. The primary drive gear consists of 2 gears having different numbers of teeth. For For the purpose of this service video, we will call the driven gear A, the main drive gear B, and the sub-gear C. Gear C is free of gear B. It is held in place only by the friction force of the conical washer. As the crank rotates, gear B drives A. At the same time, C is driven by A. Power is transmitted between B and A only. In other words, gears A, B, and C are always engaged, and therefore backlash is totally eliminated. Gear C must be installed in such a way that this groove faces outside. We will now review how to install the balancer gear and the drive gears. First, the punch marks on the balancer gear and the lower drive gear must be aligned. Then the projected mark on the crankcase and the punch marks on each drive gear must be aligned. When all marks are correctly aligned, you can install the clutch-driven gear. You must do it carefully so that these marks are aligned. When you are removing the rotor, you must use a special tool sheave holder. Then you remove the rotor using the flywheel puller. Next, you remove the pump cover. And remove the trochoid pump. Do not lose this O-ring, and check the strainer for clogging. The Yamaha RD500 is equipped with a combination of wet and dry sumps to lubricate major parts around the transmission with greater reliability. This shows the direction of oil flow. You can check the oil flow at the check bolt. Loosen the bolt slightly when the engine is idling. Then check if oil comes out from the bolt. If it does, the system is functioning properly. The transmission can be removed easily without splitting the upper and lower crankcases. The transmission case can be split with a flat screwdriver, then removed. When the transmission case cover is removed, the transmission, shift cam, and shift forks are all removed together. Then you remove shift forks, shift drum, drive gear, and driven gear from the case cover. After servicing, they are assembled in the reverse order. Upper and lower split-type crankcases are used on the RD500 to improve ease in servicing. Tightening bolts with larger numbers are loosened first, in 2 stages, beginning from 18 and going down to 17, etc. At first, loosen each bolt 1/2 of a turn at a time, diagonally. When you are installing, you must torque bolts with smaller numbers first in the reverse order of disassembly. The upper crankshaft and the lower crankshaft are not identical. They must be correctly located. The section where the flywheel magnet is installed is on the left side of the lower crankcase. The primary drive gear side of each crankshaft should be on the right-hand side of the lower crankcase. There are a number of points you must remember when you are installing them. The half circlip should be installed like this, between the upper and lower crankcases. the knock pin of the bearing must be aligned to the knock pin groove of the lower case. The projected portion of the oil seal must be aligned to the groove of the crankcase. This is the end of the major points regarding disassembly and reassembly. For more details, please refer to the service manual. In this section, we will talk about maintenance and troubleshooting of the carburetor. First, we will begin with the major points for inspecting, adjusting, and assembling the carburetor overhauling. The carburetor, YPVS, and auto lube pump must always be adjusted in this order. When you disassemble the carburetors, it is important to mark the cylinder ID number on each carburetor and put parts in separate groups in the order in which they are disassembled. The lower and upper carburetors can be synchronized by adjusting the heights of the throttle valves. After the carburetors have been assembled, the distance between the throttle valve and the body of the lower carburetor is adjusted by the idle adjust screw using a 1 mm wire. The method for this adjustment is similar to adjusting a valve clearance using a thickness gauge. Then the valve height of the upper carburetor is adjusted using a 1 mm wire, the same as for the lower carburetor. The height can be adjusted by the synchronizing screw, which is located between the upper and lower carburetors. Then the height of the valve of the lower carburetor is adjusted by the idle adjust screw using a 0.7 mm wire. When you remove the jet needles, needle jets, or throttle valves, or when you disconnect the carburetor connecting plates, you must synchronize the carburetors. Then the carburetors need to be synchronized between the right and left-hand sides. Before you begin adjusting them, you must check if the throttle cables are connected correctly on both the pull and return sides. Check if the free play of the flange at the grip is between 5 and 7 millimeters. If the play is not within these specifications, it must be corrected using this adjuster. First, set the marker on the pulley of the carburetor on the right-hand side to the fully open mark on the body when the throttle is completely open. This can be done using the adjuster on the pull side. After the right-hand side carburetor is set to the correct position, adjust the carburetor on the left-hand side. With the throttle in the open position, use the adjuster on the pull side until the pulley mark on the carburetor comes to the fully open mark on the body. Finally, close the throttle valve and see if there is an appropriate amount of free play in both the pull and return cables. As explained in the section for pre-delivery inspections, the idle speed of the engine must be adjusted by the throttle stop screw on each side. Remember, they should be turned equally. The next adjustment is the YPVS. First, you turn on the main switch, so the power valve is completely open automatically. At this time, you must insert an 8 mm lock pin into the hole on the joint arm and cylinder to make sure the valve is completely open. Keeping that position, adjust the cables using the adjuster until there is no free play. Then turn the adjuster back by a half turn. And tighten the lock nut. Then remove the lock pin. After the wires have been adjusted, turn the main switch off once, then turn it on again and check if the valve is fully open. Then adjust the pump wire. First you turn the throttle grip slightly until the cable has no free play. Keeping this position, you must check the next points. Turn on the main switch to bring YPVS to the fully open position. Then check if the half-open mark of the oil pump arm matches the mark on the pump body. If they are not aligned, turn the pump cable adjuster until they come together. At the end of the adjustment, turn off the main switch once and turn it on again, and check to see if the fully closed mark on the pump arm aligns with the mark on the body when the YPVS is fully closed. This is the end of the carburetor, YPVS, and oil pump adjustment section. Please remember, when you are adjusting them, the carburetor must be adjusted first, then the YPVS, and finally the oil pump. They must be adjusted in this order always. Now the next section of this service video is troubleshooting of the carburetors. Before we begin, however, let's review the basic operation of the carburetors. Carburetors are made of a number of parts, and these different parts affect the fuel amount in different ways depending on the throttle slide opening. So let's see what the parts are called and where they are located. The most important parts for different throttle opening ranges are the throttle valve, jet needle, pilot air jet, pilot jet, and main jet. A pilot air screw is not used on the RD500. When the throttle is at idle or up to 1/8 open, the fuel amount from the pilot system is determined by the pilot air jet, and throttle valve height. It is determined especially by the size of the pilot jet. When the size is larger, more fuel is allowed to flow. When it is small, the fuel amount becomes less. When the throttle is open from 1/8 to 1/4, a fuel-air mixture is supplied from the pilot system. In addition, gas is also supplied from the main nozzle, since a vacuum is created. The fuel amounts from the pilot system and the main nozzle are primarily determined by the size of the cutway of the throttle valve. When the size is larger, less fuel is allowed to flow. When the size is smaller, more fuel is allowed to flow. When the throttle is open from 1/4 to 3/4, the vacuum at the main nozzle further increases. As a result, the fuel amount is controlled by the jet needle and the needle jet. The fuel amount is controlled by the clip position and the degree of the taper of the jet needle, and by the inside diameter of the needle jet. Generally, it is controlled by the clip position. As the position is higher, the fuel amount is decreased. As it is lower, the fuel amount is increased. When the throttle is open from 3/4 to full, there is no aerodynamic resistance caused by the throttle valve. The amount of air increases, and the fuel amount is determined by the main jet alone. Therefore, the fuel amount is controlled by the size of the main jet. When the size is larger, the fuel amount increases. When it is smaller, the fuel amount decreases. The control of the fuel amount is affected, especially at high speed ranges, when the fuel level in the float chamber is not appropriate. It must be checked carefully because of this. We have now reviewed the different parts that control the fuel amounts at various throttle openings. Before carburetor troubleshooting, two things must be checked. Is the compression good, and are the sparks good? Only when the answer is yes to these two questions may you begin the carburetor troubleshooting. When the engine does not run smoothly, you must find the throttle opening range of the engine where the trouble starts. Once you have identified the points, you can check these things. You must check if each part is adjusted to a standard setting, if the jet or air passage is clogged, or if it's loose. In this part of the service video, we are assuming a problem in the idle system at a low throttle opening range. Problems at the idle speed range may take a number of forms. For example, the engine may not start smoothly, or the engine may not idle smoothly. These problems can be caused by parts in the fuel system, YPVS, or the oil pump. First of all, you must check if the machine is in normal running condition. First, check each of the 4 carburetors and see if there is fuel there. Also check the fuel level in each carburetor. Then, check if the free play of the throttle cable is appropriate. The next item in troubleshooting is to check if the carburetors have been synchronized properly. This can be done by comparing the heights of the throttle valves. The heights must be the same for all 4 carburetors. The next test concerns the YPVS. Turn on the main switch and see if the YPVS is fully open. At this position, see if the oil pump is half open. If there is no trouble at this test point, you can check the intake and exhaust systems. When you check the intake system, look especially for any dust in the air cleaner. Then look for any excessive carbon deposits in the silencer or the muffler of the exhaust system. If nothing unusual is found in these visual inspections, the next part to check is each carburetor itself. One way to tell which one of the 4 carburetors may be causing the trouble is to check the spark plugs. As you can see on the screen, the spark plug from cylinder number 4 is dirty. Then let's check the idle system for the 4th carburetor. Is the pilot air jet clogged? The answer is no. It looks okay. Is the pilot jet clogged then? Uh-oh, yes, it is clogged. This is what is causing the trouble. The foreign particle is now removed. Let's put the parts together and check the result at idle speed. It's good. It's running properly now. As we just saw on the screen, problems associated with carburetors must be solved through steps. First, you must identify the problem. Second, you must find the parts that are involved in the problem. Finally, you must make the necessary inspections and adjustments. This is the end of the service video presentation for the RD500. We hope you have now become more familiar with the RD500. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact your Yamaha Regional Service Manager. We also suggest that you review this service video from time to time. Once again, we would advise you to refer to the workshop manual, the assembly manual, and technical bulletins in order to obtain more complete information about the RD500. Thank you very much for joining us, and good luck.